There's a genre of channels on YouTube that I like to call gay edutainment. You know, channels like CCP Grey, Blue Jay, Simple History, the kinds of channels that are enormously popular among mainly transgenders and man-child left-wingers. There is, of course, an undisputed king of this space, a titan among men, if you will, the big fish in the pond. None other than Kurgezagt. You know him, I'm sure you've seen their videos and you're recommended, and if you've ever watched them, you probably came away with one of two conclusions, alright? If it was a video on pop science, like spaceflight or something like that, you probably thought it was a fine video and enjoyed the cutesy animation and whatever. If, however, it was a video even tangentially related to any anthropological subject, like a video on food or policing or climate change or anything like that at all, if you're anything other than completely left-wing, you came away from that video irritated by the absurd level of just gay socialism. You see, Kurgezagt has a really bad habit of filling their videos with what's literally just explicit left-wing socialist propaganda, and then acting like they're just some heckin' wholesome science YouTubers, or just promoting science, and that if you disagree with them, you're disagreeing with the science, and you need to take it up with their expert fact-checkers, you stupid fucking chud. The reality is that a lot of what they spew is actually just utter bullshit that's been dressed up in academics to come off as much smarter than it is. They put up a veneer of scientific rigor in order to put themselves up on a pedestal as being smarter than you are, so that you'll think that they're in a position to dictate to you what you ought to do. To put it into simple terms, they're the smug jack, right? The smug soy jack sneering at you and insisting that actually you're the stupid one for not wanting to eat bug burgers and live in a pod or whatever. The channel's politics can really be best described as just evil globo homo. Basically imagine the exact opposite of Alex Jones and you've got Kurgezagt. They're constantly advocating for more UN projects, more globalist policies, more intragovernmental power and global governance. They essentially push the whole one world mindset that utopian midwits always push for. I mean, just as an example, in a now deleted video on the refugee crisis, they accidentally tipped their hand when they supported raising refugee quotas for Western countries, and labeled opponents of this garbage as xenophobic rich cowards hiding behind their fences, which is just typical. You will take a bajillion refugees, and you will be grateful for it, you chud. This globalist tilt is maybe most evident in their videos on egoistic altruism, which is an ideology that basically promotes interconnected global solutions to every problem that you could imagine. More government, on a bigger scale and more powerful, is their solution to literally everything. Really everything they put out is propaganda for this sort of Klaus Schwab wing of humanity. They push this ideology that wants to convince you of your inherent guilt as a human being, that you're an unbridled bad, and that looking out for your own self-interest is evil. This is why they preach altruism and frame everything that they don't like as greedy and selfish, because Fauci forbid you, as an individual, look out for your own self-interest. You see, socialists need to convince you of your own inherent guilt in order to maintain power for themselves. This is also why their videos on issues like climate change treat those sorts of problems as an undisputed man-made crisis requiring global action, which simultaneously creates this myth of collective guilt and attributes to you some original sin for simply existing, and then also of course necessitates more government overreach and green regulations, sacrificing man on the altar of nature. They promote propaganda advocating for restrictions on your freedom in order to achieve a better life for polar bears or some bullshit like that, and then tell you that you're evil if you don't want to give up your car or stop eating meat, which is absurd. They're really essentially just the politics of Zoran Mamdani, but with nice visuals and a more pleasant accent. They'll push for more free government gives at any opportunity available. You need to up the food stamp, missa. Or better yet, push for shit like universal basic income, which they also stump for, of course. Any form of collectivist, government-expanding crap is crap that they'll push for you to eat. It's gross for those of us who don't particularly enjoy eating shit. Actually, it's a little bit ironic that they want you to eat shit, given the type of socialist states that they push for, people don't have shit to eat. Reality is that Kurgezagt subscribes to the particular brand of atheism that views you as insignificant and unimportant, that views humanity as being just another animal species, no different from all the others. I can really describe this best as being the, oh my Fauci, I heckin' love science, r/atheism brand. I think you can actually see this really clearly in their videos on space and shit, where they treat humanity as just cosmically insignificant, treating our achievements in space as evidence of just how small we are, as opposed to the reality, which of course is the exact opposite. When we put men on the moon, this only proves how great mankind is, not that we're just specks in the universe. It's absurd. Socialists are the same sort of people that will look at a massive skyscraper and say that it makes man feel small, as opposed to great for having made such a structure to begin with. But hey, I probably wouldn't be talking about Kurgezagt if that's all that they were, if they were just some midwit commie putting out stupid takes, right? Unfortunately, Kurgezagt is a propaganda outlet funded by globalist billionaires, state governments, and international organizations. Really quickly, let's talk money, because all too often if you follow the fiat, you're gonna find the agenda, and there is a hell of an agenda here, guys. First things first, I'm aware another YouTuber talked about their funding a few years back. That guy was kind of a moronic socialist though, and didn't really go very deep at all, and I'm gonna go a lot more in depth because this runs a lot deeper than he cared to dig. Also, this is not a conspiracy theory, this is straight from their own disclosures and public records. You can fact check me on this if you want, it's all public information which we're supposed to believe Kurgezagt themselves hasn't gone through the due diligence of muckraking, which I'm not sure I buy. Now, Kurgezagt likes to brag that they're mostly funded by fans through merch, Patreon, and YouTube ads, and this seems to be their main defense when confronted with the existence of their massive billionaire pay pigs. From 2020 to 2022, supposedly 65% of their revenue came from their audience. Presumably, this mostly means things like Patreon patrons, merch sales, ad revenue, stuff like that, right? They claimed that only 24% of their revenue is made up of sponsorships or grants, and that this proves that they are independent. Now, first of all, we're kind of relying on their word here. We really can't know for sure if these numbers are accurate. Additionally, for things like Patreon and merch sales, it's very difficult to know if that's all authentic real people giving them money, or if a lot of those backers are bot accounts used to give Kurgezagt money under the table. These platforms have been used to launder money in the past, after all. But hey, even so, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that 65% of the revenue is indeed authentic. Even assuming that this is true, that other 35% is still a massive number. For context, PBS, the public broadcast service, receives about 15% of their funding from the government, and because of this, they're considered state media. But Kurgezagt receives nearly twice that share of their funding in the form of grants from billionaire overlords and globalist NGOs, and we're supposed to buy that the other 65% is left untainted? I don't know about you, but if I see a third of my cake infested with bugs, I'm throwing away the whole thing, right? That's not good. Especially when you consider the sorts of organizations that they're taking money from. To start with, probably the most well-known one is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now, in 2015, they handed Kurgezagt a $570,000 check for global health and development videos. Gates, for those of you unaware, holds the beliefs that everyone needs to eat his slop plant burgers, that he should play God with population control. He doesn't give you something for nothing, and he happens to be who they themselves called their biggest supporter in 2017. But hey, 2017 was 8 years ago, and 2015 was damn near 11, so maybe they're divorced now, so to speak. Don't be so optimistic. Gates funds a ton of their go-to sources for their current content, notably Our World in Data, which pops up in pretty much any Kurgezagt video on climate change, human health, sociology, you name it. Owen's charts are everywhere in Kurgezagt stuff, and that's a part of their big incestuous loop, right? Gates pays Kurgezagt, Gates pays Owen, Kurgezagt cites Owen as expert data, and also collaborates with them and uses them as fact-checkers. Needless to say, this reflects poorly on their objectivity. But it doesn't end at the Gates, because, believe it or not, their funding gets worse. I'd like to introduce you to Open Philanthropy, which is a so-called effective altruism fund that in reality is a slush fund for leftist pipe dreams. They dumped over 5 million euros on Kurgezagt between 2021 and 2022 alone, making up about an eighth of the channel's total revenue by my math. Now, they apparently donated this in order to pay for both video production and translations into languages like Arabic and Hindi. Now, why would an American charity spend millions on exporting videos of all things to the third world, instead of, say, clean water, or in the case of India, plumbing, right? Because they fucking sorely need that. Well, to spread the gospel of what they call effective altruism, which is a World Economic Forum-backed strategy for trying to force social change. Social change, which billionaires like Klaus Schwab, of course, say is very, very necessary. Oh, and Open Philanthropy's so-called charity does not end there, by the way. Their grant list is a who's who of leftist activism. The outfit backing Kurgezagt is also bankrolling all of the following. Millions of dollars to abolitionist groups pushing to defund the police, abolish prisons, and end cash bail. Southerners on New Ground, which is basically LGBTQ activists fighting jails. They paid out $400,000 for anti-criminalization in the South. Dignity and Power Now got $1.7 million to stop LA jail expansions. Law for Black Lives, which is tied to BLM by the way, got $250,000 for decarceral strategies. The National Bail Fund Network hit it big with hundreds of thousands of dollars to bail out criminals. So-called restorative justice outfits like the Anissa Collective and Project NIA, which advocates for prison abolition, raked in cash as well. The AYNI Institute got nearly $900,000 for training black organizers in quote-unquote momentum strategies, which, if you don't know political jargon, basically means just straight-up movement building for the far left. And if you think that's all, it just keeps going. They're doing economic lobbying too, like $405,000 to the Center for Popular Democracy's Fed Up campaign for looser monetary policy, which is a great way to raise inflation, by the way. Citizen Action of New York was awarded over $1 million for bail reforms and jail closures. The political report for quote-unquote journalism on criminal justice got paid out too. As far as I can tell, Open Philanthropy exists solely to make one big push for progressive causes. From BLM to socialist economics to LGBTQ issues, I could not find so much as a single group that could even be considered remotely conservative that they supported, right? Like Veteran Aid or something like that. Not even one. Telling. But again, they have more backers than just Bill Gates or Open Philanthropy, right? Here's a name you all know. George Soros. Woohoo! Globalist bingo, let's go. Specifically, his Open Society Foundation. In 2016, Kurgezagt joined forces with them for content on drug policy. Soros is, of course, pushing for decriminalization and treating addicts like victims. Now, I myself am a libertarian, but I am under no illusions of Soros pushing for decriminalization for any good or decent reasons, alright? Soros has his fingerprints all over Kurgezagt sources too. They cite the European Center for Populism Studies, which is also linked to the Open Society Foundation, by the way, and have even gone so far as to partner with researchers from CEU, that's the Central European University, which Soros himself founded. It's genuinely all connected. Kurgezagt's political videos on polarization and echo chambers are all quoting experts from these billionaire-funded groups, all while conveniently skipping literally any right-wing experts, or hell, even so much as right-wing critiques of their proposed globalist solutions. It's a sort of gross, incestuous environment. It's really disgusting. It's not just billionaire funding either, mind you. There's also government and UN coins dropping into their pockets. The EU funneled money through programs like Treska for their Behind the Lies series on information, which is perfect for legitimizing the discrediting and jailing of dissenters. Then there's Funk, which is part of German state TV, which bankrolled their German channel from 2017 to 2023, essentially paying Kurgezagt to import globalist propaganda into Germany. This also means, of course, that German taxpayers are being forced to pay for globalist propaganda in their own language. And if you're wondering who's partnering with them for their videos on climate stuff, well, just a UN environmental program, of course. Also, the WHO has partnered with them on health issues, unsurprisingly. Kurgezagt is receiving a very substantial amount of support from taxpayer-funded globalist institutions, pushing consensus narratives on climate change, health, and social issues, and you're expected to believe that they're a trustworthy source on these very same issues. That's absurd, especially considering that they then turn around and cite the same government agencies that they're partnered with as sources for their videos. Just to flash back really quickly, back in 2019, Kurgezagt put out a video patting themselves on the back, essentially saying, we've got experts fact-checking everything now. Everything that we put out, we make sure to run by experts who approve our content. Now, in 2023, Kurgezagt, when trying to dispel the vicious, evil right-wing rumors that their views were bought, paid for, and then molded by Gates and Soros and whatnot, made very clear that they would never, ever give up editorial independence to their sponsors or grantees. They swore that the facts and information that they put out would be entirely unrelated to their billionaire globalist donors. Problem being, if you've been paying attention, you'll have noticed that essentially all of the experts they've contracted since 2019 have come from universities, think tanks, and NGOs that have been largely or entirely funded, and in some cases even founded by these same billionaire grantees. I really can't get over just how bad their sources are. I don't understand how anyone at all views this as rigorous research. Their sourcing is genuinely just a complete and total circle jerk of establishment voices. Video after video relies on the same tight-knit network: Our World in Data, the World Health Organization, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the World Resources Institute, Resources for the Future, Pew Research, Carnegie. None of these are even remotely neutral groups. They're all funded by the same elites. Gates and Open Philanthropy pour money into Our World in Data and the World Health Organization. Soros into the Central European University and the Center for Populism Studies. And then, the experts that Kurgezagt brings in to bring credibility to their videos are essentially all from these same elite-funded groups. You're not going to find citations from right-leaning think tanks like Heritage in a Kurgezagt video. No, instead, all of their content is skewed towards effective altruism, long-termism, and trusting global institutions. The exact same ideology of their funders. They expect you to believe that this is purely coincidental and that they aren't being paid by these various groups to promote certain views. You're expected to believe that Kurgezagt themselves don't know the full extent of their incestuous infrastructure of experts and sourcing, which at a bare minimum is a clear conflict of interest. Put plainly, Kurgezagt is just very clearly not an edutainment channel. It's an indoctritainment channel. You cannot claim editorial independence when your paycheck comes from Bill Gates and George Soros, and your sources are their pets. Kurgezagt is not independent. They're a mouthpiece. This is maybe the most obvious example ever of a channel being bought and paid for globalist propaganda. I don't even see how this is remotely disputable at this point. If you want to see what it looks like when evil tries to conceal itself, when the devil pretends to be your savior, this is it. This is the face of evil. The face of evil is a fucking cartoon bird in this instance, but it's still fucking evil nonetheless. They are trying to convince you of your own guilt, your own ineptitude, your own smallness, that you're untrusty and no good and small and little and common and average, that you're just one of the little guys and you need a big, massive, global state to protect you, because little, small, average, worthless, common people like yourself could never manage their own lives on your own, right? This is an ideology of evil, and of anti-human, anti-life rhetoric. Make sure you recognize it, because unfortunately it's only becoming more common. I want to really quickly give you the counter-narrative to the propaganda that they spew, because even though Kurgezagt wants you to believe that the world's problems are so big, so complicated, stated that only a planetary super government of experts could save us, that your carbon footprint makes you a criminal, and that cultural homogeneity is evil, private property and profit are the root of all evil, and that the only moral thing to do is to hand over your life, your money, and your freedom to people who already have more of all three than you'll ever see, that's not actually the truth. You're being lied to, right? I want to take an opportunity to tell you the truth now. Don't worry, I'm not funded by George Soros or the UN, so you can rest assured that I'm not here to convince you to give up your rights, alright? Global extreme poverty has indeed fallen faster in the last 40 years than in the previous 400. Kurgezagt has promoted this as evidence of the hard work of globalists finally paying off, but that's bullshit, of course. It's not because some international body finally got enough power that poverty decreased, but because billions of people in China, India, and Africa were allowed to own land, start businesses, and keep what they earn, and also trade with whoever they wanted to, that you ended up seeing those sorts of positive movements, right? Regular people trading freely pulled a billion human beings out of starvation. It's absurd to attribute these victories to regulatory wins, when regulations are what kills the victory in reality. The truth is that the virtues of the modern world, things like cheap energy, cargo ships the length of skyscrapers, reusable rockets, none of that came from a global ministry of innovation. It came from engineers, entrepreneurs, and investors who were allowed to keep the upside if they succeeded, and then, in turn, take the loss if they failed. If the reward for solving a problem belongs to the person who solves it, problems end up getting solved ridiculously fast. When instead the reward goes to a committee that can't be fired and never goes bankrupt, you get Solyndra, you get $3,000 hammers at the Pentagon, you get fucking wind turbines that freeze in Texas, and grid operators who beg you to turn your thermostat down, right? You get fucking just, socialist garbage. A garbage socialist system that doesn't work, where everything's broken and everything sucks. It blows dick. Let's talk about immigration too, okay? Because that's another thing Kurgezagt really wants you to push the fucking left-wing narrative on. The truth is that some places, like Poland, did not embrace the Kurgezagt approach, and instead decided that letting in infinity welfare leeches is a policy written by people who don't have to live with the consequences of it. They instead supposed that charity begins at home, that people ought to have freedom of association, and therefore freedom of disassociation as well, and that compassion without boundaries isn't compassion, but suicide. The Kurgezagt approach produced skyrocketing rape statistics. The other produced safe streets and the lowest crime rates in Europe. It turns out that the global homo solution is not the correct one. Shock of all shocks. Now let's get into some more lies. For example, you were told that the cow fart apocalypse is coming, and that the only solution is billionaires selling you fake meat grown in a lab financed by those same billionaires. However, the actual reality is that the ranchers who actually own land are reversing desertification, sequestering more carbon per acre than most forests do, and producing the most nutrient-dense food on Earth while making a profit, and answering to no one but their customers. Farms are actually one of the most eco-friendly industries on Earth, and I promise you that they would actually be treated that way if farmers voted for the left more often. But because they dare to oppose socialist institutions, those socialist institutions will lie about them instead. You have to recognize why they're doing what they're doing. Kurgezagt will push for monopolies, which are favored by globalists because they're not competitive, and competition is the only censorship-resistant, inflation-proof, politician-proof way that human beings have ever discovered to figure out what actually works. The future shouldn't be decided in Geneva conference rooms by people who have never had to live under the rules that they write. That's the monopolistic reality that Kurgezagt pushes for. Instead, what should happen is it should be decided by people choosing what they want to do with their money, buying the products that they like and rejecting the ones that they don't. We'll see how long plant-based meat lasts in that environment. At the end of the day, the simple reality is that every time you watch a Kurgezagt video, you're not learning science, but instead having your brain trained to accept the next stage of the Great Reset. You're being taught that your nation, your culture, and your individual rights are negotiable for the greater good, as defined by billionaires who fly private jets to Davos. You're watching a propaganda outlet funded by people who hate you and who want you to own nothing. So, I don't know, maybe stop watching Zog slop made by retards who hate you. A good rule of thumb is that pretty much anything pushed for by a combination of the UN, EU, German government, George Soros, and Bill Gates is evil and you should avoid it. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Maybe like and subscribe, that'd be pretty cool of you. And have a fucking fantastic day, my primarily schizophrenic, mind-broken Goyim fanbase.